like a big slumber party.
I don't think Dad would approve of all the boys, though.
I know I do.
My relationship with RWBY is, well, complicated. If I had to describe it in words, it would be a roller coaster of feelings. It's a bittersweet relationship that has only lasted this long because it was a huge part of my childhood. Yet, nostalgia can only carry it so far. Sometimes it can be really, really good, and other times it can be really, really bad. Like sitting around for an entire season waiting for the plot to start, only to find yourself at the end credits with 4 hours of your life wasted levels of bad. Seriously though, can we just forget Volume 4 even exists? Please? Never mind my strife with the 4th season, I remember being infatuated with it when I was younger. It was only natural that the first 3 seasons became my favorite parts of the series. Not only was I obsessed with the world and the new medium of anime that had opened up to me, yes, I call RWBY anime even if it didn't originate in Japan, I was particularly interested in the few characters of the show that were actually well written. I hadn't consumed enough media at the time to truly consciously understand what made a character good or bad, but the well-written characters still had their ways of gravitating my interest. So I'd like to analyze, and to be honest, probably overanalyze, my unrivaled favorite character of the series. Just a little disclaimer. If you hadn't guessed already, this video is going to have major spoilers for volumes 1 through 3 of RWBY, and some very minor spoilers for the volumes after. Anyway, without further ado, let's talk about fairy tales, kingdoms, maidens, and some oversized farming tools.
They see you as small and helpless. They see you as just a child. Surprised when they find out that a warrior will soon run wild. Prepare for your greatest moments. Prepare for your finest hour. The dream that you've always dreamed is suddenly about to flower. We are lightning, straight from the thunder, miracles of ancient wonder. This will be the day we've waited for. This will be the day we open up the door. I don't wanna hear absolution. Hope you're ready for revolution. Welcome to a world of new solution. Welcome to a world of bloody evolution. In time, your heart will open minds. A story will be told, and victory is in a simple soul.
By far, one of the strongest and most effective tools in a writer's arsenal is characters. They're the very faces of a story that you're forced to look at for the duration of a piece of media, so they better be interesting. Even if the plot is just mediocre, or sometimes if it's a complete mess, fiction can be saved by a lovable cast and occasionally even a single character. Sure, a good plot could save fiction from being a disaster, but a good plot is often correlated with good characters to progress it, whereas a good plot is not required to have good characters. Some examples that I believe this to be the case with are Battlestar Galactica, Kokoro Connect, Overlord, Toradora, and Frozen 2. Battlestar's plot wasn't anything horrible, though the characterization was definitely far stronger. With Kokoro Connect, it focuses on characters and willingly sacrifices building upon its supernatural world to do so. Overlord is a unique premise that only works well because of its collection of intriguing, albeit fairly static, characters. The point of Toradora isn't who ends up with who, it's how the characters progress. Frozen 2 has the kind of plot that is perfect to half-mindedly watch while vacuuming the house, and only serves to develop the pre-established cast. In each case, the cast is easily one of the show's most powerful factors. What is it that makes these casts so powerful? It's quite simple, actually. However, it's still rare to see. The characters feel human. Most of them are dynamic, have interesting and unique personalities, and, most importantly, they're flawed. The characters actually change over time, and they aren't perfect people. As we all know, humans aren't perfect either, nor are they completely static with an unchanging personality. Moreover, in terms of characterization, the phrase well-written is synonymous with the word humanized. RWBY 100% has some characters that, by the aforementioned standards, are humanized. On the other hand, RWBY also has a plethora of characters that are far from that. There is a stark variance of effective characterization among the cast of RWBY. There are characters like Ruby, there are ones like Pyrrha, and then there are characters such as Weiss or Cinder who fall somewhere in between. Strangely enough, RWBY is really great at establishing characters with the potential to be dynamic and interestingly flawed. Unfortunately, potential is worthless if it's taken nowhere, and RWBY rarely goes anywhere with the potential of its characters. As a result, it runs into the problem of characters such as Oscar and RWBY, who teeter ever so closely on the edge of being a Mary Sue. Honestly, the only thing that keeps RWBY from being a total Mary Sue through most of the series is the fact that she can't win every fight with the power of friendship.
I don't care what you say! We will stop them, and I will stop you! Bet on that!
I've got the fever, and this heat's gonna last all night. Came here for
The easiest, and often most impactful way to portray character flaws is to have a character make a mistake, and then pay the price of said mistake. Ironically, the one character who was established like a Mary Sue turned out to be the greatest character of the entire series. The tragedy of Pyrrha Nikos is one of the few examples in RWBY of fantastic characterization. So let's explore the rise, life, and fall of the invincible huntress. Legends. Stories scattered through time. Mankind has grown quite fond of recounting the exploits of heroes and villains, forgetting so easily that we are remnants, byproducts of a forgotten past. Many of the characters of RWBY are loosely based on these legends, more commonly known as fairy tales or mythoi. And no, I'm not referring to the cushy modern adaptations of these fables. I'm talking about actual fairy tales and historic tales. RWBY is based on the story of Red Riding Hood, Weiss on the story of Snow White, Jean on Jeanne d'Arc, and Pyrrha on the mythos of Achilles. Born of the king of Myrmidons and a sea nymph, Achilles was destined for greatness from the very day of his origin. Even if he was a capable warrior, he was half human and only half god, and to that extent was not immortal like his mother, nor was he invincible. His mother wanted nothing but to protect her child, so she took him to the boundary of the underworld and earth to a river with unique properties. The water of the river Styx made any part of someone it touched invulnerable. Achilles' mother dipped him into the waters, but she held him by the heel to do so. Therefore, his heel never actually touched the water. Achilles went on to fulfill his destiny, fighting in battle after battle. That was until he captured a princess by the name of Briseis. He fell in love with her, which disrupted his desire to continue to fight. Agamemnon, the commander of the Greek military, was frustrated with the distraction love caused for Achilles, so he took Briseis from him. Depressed by the loss of his love, Achilles rejected any remaining will to fight he had, and allowed his friend to stand in for him in battle. The eventual death of that friend led him to take up his spear and fight once again. He had the appearance of invincibility, but lying under it all was one simple weakness. Apollo knew of that weakness and guided an arrow into Achilles' heel, ending his reign as the undefeatable Greek warrior. Achilles valued his destiny to be the greatest Greek warrior over all else, yet when faced with a choice, he was torn. Ultimately, he chose the love that disrupted his values, sending himself to his own demise. Pyrrha was blessed with opportunities and talent beyond comparison at birth. She believed she was fated to be a warrior, and just as with Achilles' story, Pyrrha experienced a love that disrupted her values and self-assigned destiny. That was the point where the two stories began to diverge. Pyrrha Nikos' life, although similar, contrasts from Achilles' in many ways. The biggest difference was where their weaknesses lied. Achilles' weakness was in his heel, and even though Pyrrha was shot by an arrow in the heel during her fight with Cinder, the final arrow was in her heart. Her weakness was her heart, which could have symbolized many things. It could have been representative of her kindness or love. She was overly kind, however, that was not the root of her weakness. Likewise, her love was not directly involved with her death, though it did cause confliction, and I'll touch more on that later. The heart is commonly related to the soul, a manifestation of life force and morality. Pyrrha had a moral compass that showed the weight she attributed to different things. That weight is also known as value. Unlike a disappointingly large portion of RWBY's cast, Pyrrha had a unique value set of her own. RWBY develops a lot of its protagonists to have remarkably similar values, making them feel less human because, as is universal knowledge, humans all have different value sets. Pyrrha valued becoming her ideal self over everything else. She had no issues upholding that value until one little change disrupted it all, forcing her to make a fatal decision. Sounds a little like another story, doesn't it? In Volume 1, Pyrrha was introduced as a near-perfect person, a Mary Sue. The other characters spoke of her talents in fighting, and she didn't have any apparent flaws in her personality. Later in the series, it was revealed that she only put up a front to be perfect. Her amazing talents and opportunities created an idealistic pressure on her. It forced her to uphold an appearance of her idealistic self in front of everyone she met. She was placed on a pedestal by her peers. Weiss illustrated this when she explained Pyrrha's exploits as an excellent huntress in training towards the beginning of Volume 1. She had to explain Pyrrha's fame to Jean, someone who was otherwise completely unaware of who Pyrrha was. Because of that ignorance, Jean spoke to her on a level ground, allowing her to realize the pedestal she was placed on. Before she met Jean in Volume 1, she never actually noticed that she was placed on a pedestal, or that she was constantly caving under the pressure to uphold an idealistic image. Jean gave her a place to be herself. When she spent time with Jean, she was able to, if only briefly, step down from her pedestal and let her true self shine. Naturally, she fell in love with Jean. That love for him may have given her an outlet to permanently step down from her pedestal and break free of the pressured masks she wore, but she chose to continue with her value in her self-assigned fate. In truth, for quite some time, her love for Jean didn't get in the way of her other values. She was never forced off of the pedestal she was placed on, so she stayed there, only making the issue worse. Jean was the only one who saw all the way through Pyrrha's front of unwavering pride and capability. Not even Ozpin could see that it was all a facade. He misplaced his faith in her fortitude, and selected her to inherit the Fall Maiden's powers. Becoming the next Fall Maiden was an opportunity for Pyrrha to become the warrior she believed she was meant to be, and to uphold her idealism, but at the cost of who she was. Her soul would have become morphed with another, shattering her former self. Losing herself would not have normally been too much of an issue for her. After all, before Jean, she valued her ideal self so much more than her true self that the line separating the two faded. Losing herself would have meant losing almost nothing of value. With her love for Jean, she had a clear definition of who she was as a real person. Furthermore, her love for Jean, something she valued almost as highly as the pedestal, would have been destroyed if she inherited the Maiden's powers. Ozpin and the other members of the Brotherhood pressured her to become the next Fall Maiden, knowing the likely costs tied to it. They were running out of time, so their actions reflected that desperation. Pyrrha still hesitated despite that pressure because her love for Jean was so strong that it disrupted her values. It was then that the conflict between her two values finally appeared. It was something unfamiliar to Pyrrha, leading her to push Jean and her other friends away, no matter how much they tried to help. At the end of the volume, she decided to become the next Fall Maiden. Sadly, she made her decision far too late. She was unable to inherit the powers before Cinder interrupted, taking the powers for herself. Pyrrha knew all too well that her hesitation ruined her opportunity to reach her proclaimed destiny, yet she still did all that she could to realize it. She couldn't live with herself, choosing love over idealism. She fought a force she knew she couldn't defeat in order to make up for the collapsing of her value set. In her fight with Cinder, she wished for nothing more than her own death. She ignored a rising issue even when it was right in front of her. Her values collided, compelling her to make one fatal decision. Pyrrha had a choice. And not only did she hesitate, but she chose wrong. The cost of that choice was her death. The theme of Pyrrha's story is very applicable to our everyday lives. Values are an integral part of every human being. Whether you value friends or family more, or whether you value work or fun more, your set of morals will vary from every other person you meet. Every decision we make is based on some value. A morbid but adequate example of this value-based decision-making is a variation of the trolley problem. It's the same setup. A train is headed to a split in the tracks, and you must decide which track the train takes. Instead of it being a smaller group of people versus a larger group, there is only one person on each track. One person is a friend, and one is a family member. Your core values would dictate which track you send the train on. Of course, your answer would vary depending on specifically who the family member is and who the friend is. To solve this problem, a Mary Sue would somehow break even the boundaries of reality to save them both. A tragedy like Pyrrha's actually works better because it shows the costs of her values, even if it is dark. Regardless, what you answer today is probably different from what you would have answered, say, 5 years ago. This is because our values aren't static. They change over time as long as we allow those natural changes to occur. There is an infinite number of possible values. Some have attempted to organize the limitless possibilities into generalized and broad categories. One site lists these categories as certainty, control, security, peace, health, discipline, and so on. While doing this does make it easier to measure values and tangible information, it in no way covers all possibilities. Still, taking a personal value test is a very enlightening and informative experience, so I recommend you give one a try if you have the time. I was especially interested by how much my values had changed when I took the test a few weeks ago, compared to when I took a similar test my freshman year of high school. I'll link a short one in the description in case you want to try it out. Focusing back in on Pyrrha, she had a specific and profound value in idealism. Such a unique value is an example of something that can't easily be placed into a value category. While her values and pride may not have been too relatable to the average viewer, the theme of those values should not be disregarded. She presents the theme that upholding values without being flexible enough to change them when it's necessary can be costly. Events in our life can only change us for the better or worse if we allow them to alter ourselves and our morals. Nothing is without a cost. and the cost of having an indestructible value set is usually not worth it. Once more, having such a value set can create a wall between you and the people you care about. Pyrrha's tragedy also illustrates that a tunnel vision focus on upholding a front of idealism all of the time is simply naive. The arc of Pyrrha Nikos is nowhere short of a tragedy, but its spectacular rise and morbid conclusion made her one of the greatest characters in all of RWBY. All her life she lived for idealism, making a facade of an invincible huntress and the perfect girl. One disruption, the love for someone who saw through that facade, led to her facing a decision that tested her pride and values. Nevertheless, she did not waver, not even for the love of her life, and she took up her spear to fight what she couldn't defeat so that she could see her shattered destiny through to the bitter end. Her heart of steel was her weakness, a weakness that she was too consumed by idealism to see. Pyrrha had a choice. She chose too late, she chose wrong, and it cost her everything. Just like Achilles, she was destined for greatness, only for that greatness to be destroyed by a single guided arrow. Or maybe she was just a plot device for the sole purpose of making RWBY finally use her silver eyes. Let's not think about that.
Now it's cold.